I decided to do my insight project on Matej Jackal's survival story. The summary of this story was that he was a 10-year-old boy living in Timisoara, Romania, and one day he was about 30 miles, I think, away from home with his friends, and then he got taken by German Nazi leaders from Romania and was like on his way to go to a concentration camp. On the way to this concentration camp, Mate, as well as others, were devising a plan to escape because they had heard that they were taken to a concentration camp and not a work camp. Um, One night, the Nazi leaders opened up the door to the boxcar to put in a new person and take up someone who had died, and they had escaped, multiple of them. Mate had escaped by hiding under the boxcar and going in the opposite direction. After he had escaped, he was hiding somewhere, and the next day was found by a partisan who had asked Mate if he wanted to join and become a partisan. Mate had agreed to join, and then after this, he had trained with the other partisans to spy on the German Nazis in villages by acting as like a war orphan and staying in people's houses while getting information on those, and then they would like attack and raid their houses and take their food, which is how they survived. Um, at the end of the day, Mate ended up surviving until the end of the war, in which his leaders just separated, and then he took off with some other younger partisans to find a new life, in which he moved to Israel and joined the war. And then after that, he became a physical education teacher and lived with his family in Israel. Uh, my reflection on this story was just very upsetting for the fact that Mate had to go through everything that he did. At 10 years old, I could never imagine having to go through any of that, much less having to grow up as much as he did. I think that one of the many hardships he faced was being part of the partisans, and the scene where he had to shoot a girl who was helping the Nazis. He was only 10 years old and had to basically kill someone. I don't think I could ever do that. And at 10 years old, I don't even think I'd be in the right mind to be able to do something like that. I think that it was interesting how I think because Mate was so small, he was able to find many hiding places. Like I said, the night that he escaped, he had hid in like a small like cave where he was found by the partisans the next day. He was able to hide in boxcars when he was running around with his partisans after the war ended. He moved to Israel and kind of started a new life. So I think that Mate really relied on those hiding places because by the time he moved to Israel, he was only 14 years old. I think his story also of how he survived was very interesting. Um, I think that it takes a lot of growing up and a lot of maturity for someone to be able to survive the way that Mete did, and I think that he really had to become an adult a lot faster than he expected, obviously, to be able to get to where he was. And I think that when the group of the Jewish people who decided and asked him if he wanted to be rehomed for these Jewish children who really didn't get a childhood, I think that he really knew that he was ready to live out his childhood. And even though he had struggled for so long to, stray away from that, I think that in the end he decided that it was best to try to regain at least a little bit of any childhood and innocence that he had. Thank you.